Alexander the Great, the conquest of Persia that shook the world. In just 10 short years, a young man barely in his 20s crushed an empire that once ruled from Egypt to India. What turned Alexander into the most unstoppable storm in human history?
Before the storm. More than 2,300 years ago, the lands east of the Mediterranean were home to two colossal civilizations facing each other. Greece, small but fierce, and Persia, a massive empire spanning more than 5 million square kilometers. The Achaemenid Persian Empire was wealthy, populous, militarily powerful, and ruled from the Ionian coast all the way to the Indus Valley. At its head stood King Darius III, a ruler with absolute power. To the west, the kingdom of Macedon, once looked down upon, had risen under the iron rule of King Philip II, Alexander's father. When Philip was assassinated, a 20-year-old youth took the throne. His name was Alexander. From the beginning, doubts swirled around him. Can this boy truly inherit his father's legacy? But few realized this young man had been tutored by the philosopher Aristotle. Trained in combat since childhood, mastered horseback riding at age 7, and carried ambitions far beyond the limits of his age. Why did Alexander want to conquer Persia?
Alexander did not go to war simply to expand territory.
He wanted revenge for Greece, revenge for the cities Persia had burned and ravaged for centuries. Going back to the time of King Xerxes. The campaign began at the Hellespont, where Europe and Asia are separated by a narrow strait. Upon stepping onto Asian soil, Alexander thrust his spear into the ground and declared, "I claim Asia as mine." That moment ignited a journey that would reshape the world.
Granicus, the first thunderstrike. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander crossed the sea with about 40,000 men, a force much smaller than Persia's. At the river Granicus, in modern-day Turkey, Persian forces blocked the way. The river flowed swiftly, and the opposite bank was steep, a natural fortress. Alexander's generals warned him. A frontal attack is suicide. But wearing a shining breastplate and mounted on his horse Bucephalus, Alexander charged directly into the river. A ferocious battle erupted in the water. Spears clashed, metal screamed, horses reared, the river roared like thunder. Alexander was nearly killed when a Persian commander struck his helmet. At the last second, Clytus the Black saved him by severing the attacker's arm. The result, the Persian army collapsed. A message echoed across Asia. Alexander has arrived.
Issus, when Alexander faced the king of Persia. Humiliated by defeat, Darius III marched out personally. The clash unfolded at Issus, a narrow strip of land between mountains and sea. The Persian army, nearly 3 times larger, could not deploy properly. Darius chose the wrong battlefield. Alexander chose the perfect moment. Like a lightning spear, Alexander led his companion cavalry straight into the Persian flank, tearing it apart. At the center, Darius watched his lines crumble. The most powerful king in Asia panicked and fled, leaving behind his own family. It was a symbolic moment. A king running away, and a new emperor rising. After Issus, Alexander conquered the Levant and marched into Egypt, where the locals welcomed him as a liberator, not an invader. In Egypt, he founded Alexandria, a city that would later become one of humanity's greatest cultural centers.
Gaugamela, the battle that sealed Persia's fate. In 331 BC, on the plains of Gaugamela, near modern Mosul, Iraq, Darius III assembled the largest Persian army ever.
Over 20,000 men, including terrifying scythe chariots.
The night before the battle, Macedonian soldiers were anxious. But Alexander slept so peacefully that General Parmenion had to wake him. They asked, "Your Majesty, aren't you worried?" Alexander smiled. "I have already won. Tomorrow, I merely claim it." When the Persian chariots charged, Alexander ordered his men to open lanes, letting the chariots pass through before surrounding and destroying them, a tactic never seen before. Then he led his cavalry straight toward the Persian center, where Darius stood. Once again, Darius fled. This time, Persia fell with him. Alexander marched into Babylon, Susa, and finally Persepolis, the heart of Persia. Persepolis shone like heaven on earth. But after a night of drinking and disputes, Flames erupted. The palace burned, a symbol of a fallen empire. Some say Alexander regretted it. Some say he did it deliberately as Greek revenge. History isn't certain. But the fire marked a turning point. Alexander had become master of the entire Near East.
Hunting Darius, the final pursuit. Though defeated, Darius was still alive. Alexander sought to capture him, not to execute him, but to legitimize rule over Persia. But when Alexander finally reached him, Darius had been betrayed and killed by his own generals. Looking upon the fallen king, Alexander whispered, "I wished to face you as a king, not like this." He ordered a royal Persian funeral, a gesture of respect, and a declaration that he sought to unite, not annihilate.
Beyond the edge of the world. After taking all of Persia, Alexander did not stop. He marched into Central Asia, crossed deserts, battled rebellions, founded cities, and pressed onward to India. The lands beneath the Himalayas were distant and nearly unconquerable. But Alexander pushed forward. When they reached the Hyphasis River, his soldiers, exhausted after 10 years of war, pleaded, "We have reached the end of the world." Alexander stood silently by the river, staring east. He wanted to continue. But even the greatest rulers must hear the hearts of their men. For the first time in his life, Alexander turned back.
The young king with no equal. Alexander returned to Babylon, preparing for new campaigns. But in 323 BC, at just 32 years old, he died suddenly. The cause remains a mystery: fever, poisoning, or exhaustion from thousands of kilometers of warfare. He died young, but left behind an empire stretching from Greece to India, larger than any kingdom before it. Cities named Alexandria sprang up everywhere. Greek and Eastern cultures blended, creating the brilliant Hellenistic age. Alexander was not just a general. He was a force that redrew the world map, brought civilizations together, and became an eternal legend.
Conclusion. Alexander's conquest of Persia was not merely a series of brutal battles. It was a story of ambition breaking limits, of willpower bending destiny, and of a man who believed the world was never big enough for his dreams. He did not live long. But he lived like a flame, burning so brightly that its light has lasted for more than 2,000 years. If you want to hear more epic tales from Alexander's extraordinary life, subscribe to The Turning Point so you won't miss the next chapter.